You're listening to Eating for Eden, episode 30. When it comes to doing something about climate change, your food choices matter. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden, a podcast that takes a food-first approach to climate action. I'm your host, Jessica J. Schroeder, and I am passionate about food that tastes good and does good. I'll guide you with practical tips and help you thoroughly enjoy your food along the way. Before we get started today, I wanted to let you know that there's still time to snag my highly discounted nutrition coaching rates. If you've been considering this opportunity but have questions, feel free to reach out to me. Just email edenandme@substack.com. If this is the first you're hearing about this and you'd like to learn more, check out episode 26. In that episode, I talk about this offer, who it's for, what to expect, and so forth. There are limited spots available, so don't wait. And if you're listening to this episode well after it was released, but you're interested in coaching, please do reach out to see what I'm up to and what my going rates are at the time. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, moving on. Last week's episode was geared toward those who don't like to cook, or for whatever reason, don't want to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. If you have that person or people in your lives, I'd love for you to share that episode with them. There are lots of practical tips and notes of encouragement they might appreciate. But what if you love to cook? What if, like me, you come home from the library with arms full of cookbooks? What if you have countless Pinterest boards with saved recipes you wish you could find enough time to try? What if your pastime is going to nice restaurants, in part so that you can get more ideas for cooking at home? If any of that resonates with you, I'm glad you're listening in. This episode is for you. First things first, if you'd raise your hand and identify as a foodie, I imagine you enjoy a large variety of foods. And I imagine that includes animal-based foods. We all know there are numerous gastronomic delicacies hailing from animal origins. From the start, then, we have a barrier to overcome, because eating for planetary health requires a heavy reduction in animal product consumption. Notice what I didn't say. I didn't say that everyone needs to give up animal products entirely, but the need for reducing our intake, and reducing it a lot, is real. So, how do you feel about that? As a self-proclaimed foodie, I can guess, and I can understand, that you probably feel hesitant. The idea of eating plant-based, whether plant-predominant or plant-exclusive, may seem daunting. You may feel deprived just thinking about it. No duck confit? No osso buco? Simply stated, it might just not feel worth it. I know, because that's what I used to think. I was the last person that I, or anyone who knew me, would have expected to go plant-based. I ordered meat lovers pizza. I chose cheesecake for nearly every birthday cake. I adored cured meats and cheeses on a charcuterie board. I would use tons of butter, eggs, milk, and cream to bake regularly and try my hand at various confectionery feats. In many ways, my kitchen and my palate used to orbit around animal products. But so much has changed. The more I learned and the more I tasted the possibilities in plant foods, I moved away from animal products. And I think the only animal-based ingredients currently in my home are canned sardines and anchovy paste. I still cook and bake regularly, and likely with even more interest and gusto than before. And while I'm still not strictly plant exclusive, I have the occasional croissant or salmon sushi. The overwhelming majority of my diet comes from plants. And I don't feel deprived. How did I get here? What hope is there for you to embrace plants, reduce your consumption of animal products, and still find immense delight in your kitchen and at your table? In short, I made small changes over time. I started where I was, chose something to change, and built from there. If you don't feel like you could ever completely give up meat or dairy, don't sweat it. We don't need the entire world to go vegan, but we do need a lot of people to significantly reduce their consumption of animal products, especially beef. Start with what you do feel willing to give up, as well as what you're willing to reduce. If you don't care much about beef, but can't imagine saying farewell to bacon, then start there. Omit beef from your diet and find meaty, hearty swaps for beef, such as dark-skinned beans, lentils, and mushrooms. But don't shame yourself for wanting to enjoy bacon on occasion. All or nothing thinking typically doesn't help much with dietary changes, especially sustainable ones. Or maybe you're really into chicken. You're not ready to say goodbye, but you're willing to cut down on how many times a week you eat it. You can swap tofu or white beans into your favorite chicken dishes a few times a week, and also try out new plant-based recipes to add to your rotation. Perhaps omitting all meat feels like no big deal to you, but you adore cheese. If you can't imagine giving up cheese, don't focus on that. Start with finding protein-rich swaps for where you currently use any kind of meat, and continue to enjoy cheese. If you're open to it, explore ways you might reduce your cheese consumption without cutting it out altogether. Rather than eating it daily or nearly every day, treat it as a special item you indulge in on occasion, once or twice a week, for instance, and truly savor it when you do have it. In addition, you can try out some cheese swaps to explore creative ways to get the feel of having cheese in your diet, while using ingredients like tofu and nuts, which have a much lower carbon footprint. To get started on this, see the show notes for links to some recipes for plant-based cheeses. With all this theoretical talk, however, I'd like to help keep things in proper perspective. As a quick reminder of comparative carbon footprints of some of the foods we've been talking about, measured in kilograms of CO2 equivalents emitted per kilogram of food product, nearly 24 kilograms are emitted for cheese versus only 3.16 for tofu. That means cheese's emissions are over 7.5 times those of tofu. Cheese's emissions are also over 7 times those of ground nuts, think peanuts, and over 50 times those of tree nuts. Considering that cheese alternatives can be made from these low-emission plant foods, it's clear, quite clear, which is a better environmental option, at least from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective. Moving over to meat, while beef from beef herds is by far the largest emitter, other meat products don't fare well either compared to plant foods, especially when comparing sources of protein like tofu, soy milk, and other legumes and nuts, which would likely take the place of meat in someone's diet. For a bit of perspective, chicken's emissions are 3 times that of tofu, and pig meat is nearly 7 times that of other pulses, think beans, lentils, legumes. To end with beef, beef's emissions are over 55 times those of other pulses or legumes. To see this for yourself, check out the Our World in Data chart in the show notes. And I really do encourage you to take a look. It's quite eye-opening if you've never seen it. While I do hope that these sobering statistics do just that, sober us up to the reality of the impacts our food choices have on the current climate crisis, I don't want you to feel discouraged or to stop listening right here. The encouraging news is that you likely have a choice. Odds are, if you're listening to this podcast, you have agency regarding what you eat day in and day out. As a foodie, I know you care about what you eat. You care that it's tasty. You care that it's the proper temperature. And I know, because so do I. You're already good at caring about what you eat. You can now consider the source of that food as well. How much of what you eat is coming from plants versus animals? But rather than spiraling into a sense of shame for whatever plant versus animal percentages you might estimate, or feeling deprived in advance simply by imagining giving up a certain food, I have a better approach for you to take. Develop an abundance mindset. My key piece of advice to the foodie, to the person who loves to cook, is to lean into the delight of creating delicious meals with plants. If you love good flavor, If you love the cooking process, and if you love discovering new favorites or even recreating or reinventing old favorites, there is so much joy to be found in eating plant-based. Again, take it from the former meat lovers pizza girl. It's a beautiful, exciting new frontier. Rather than focusing on what you are giving up or reducing, instead focus on the beautiful abundance and variety of flavors, textures, and opportunities that await you in the plant kingdom. Moving into a bit more practical advice, what's the plant-curious foodie to do in the kitchen? I'll give 4 practical tips, each with a little bit of explanation. Tip number 1, figure out what you love. My husband and I eventually realized it wasn't so much meat or dairy that we loved. It was the flavors, the textures, the sensations that the foods we had previously been familiar with evoked. We liked the silky creaminess of a sauce. We liked the smoky complexity of char. We liked the toothsome bite or the crispy crunch or the sink your teeth in chew. If you haven't experimented much with how plant foods can provide these unique, pleasurable experiences, I encourage you to start exploring. Cow's milk, heavy cream isn't the only thing that can make a sauce creamy. Meat isn't the only source of so-called meaty, savory umami. Once you realize what components of particular dishes you love, not the ingredients, but the experiences or sensations they evoke, if you're used to finding those from animal products, you can begin to experiment with plants to see what vegetables, legumes, grains, nuts, seeds, and fruits might be capable of such feats as well. And honestly, sometimes in even more remarkable ways. Tip number 2, make plants the star. Instead of relying on plants to play a supportive role, learn how to embrace the unique qualities of particular plants to make them shine. For instance, some vegetables are at their best when roasted. Many whole grains don't need a lot of help, but just proper cooking and sufficient salting. Eat fresh fruits at the peak of ripeness and experiment with ways you might play on their sweet and tart components. Also, cook beans at home. My conviction is that most people don't care for beans because they've only had canned beans. As a foodie, you'll probably love heirloom beans especially, but even if you're not ready to splurge on ordering them online yet, though they still work out to costing less than or equivalent to the cheapest meats out there, pick up some common varieties from the grocery store and compare the quality of home-cooked to canned. It's hard to go back once you've tasted the difference. Don't know where to begin? Pick one central ingredient to build a dish around. Let's say you picked up a beautiful bunch of beets at the grocery store. You can roast up the roots and make those the star of your dish, using the greens in a supporting role. Decide if you want to roast a variety of other root vegetables or lean more into sautéing. Decide whether you'd like a bean in the dish or what whole grain you might serve it over or alongside, what kinds of spices you might use, whether you want to finish the dish with a particular topping such as chopped pistachios or cashew cream, etc. Each individual ingredient that you choose to be the star will call for or invite its own unique pairings. For instance, beets might make you think of sweet potatoes, squash, carrots, or parsnips, putting like with like. At the same time, they might call for some contrast, such as fresh herbs like parsley and mint, or basil. You might choose something earthy and nutty like barley or farro to serve alongside, or contrast it a bit with a lighter grain like millet. This simple, imaginative example provides just a teeny glimpse into all that is possible. There are myriad possible combinations. Just pick something you like to begin with and start dreaming up options to try in the kitchen. Tip number 3, develop an abundance mindset through exploring and highlighting various flavors and textures. Rather than focusing on what you're giving up, so to speak, look at it as opening up a world of possibility by embracing what plants could become. Related to the last point, there are so many possible combinations of plant foods. Moving away from animal products should feel like a wide world opening before you, an expansive vista of as yet unexplored opportunities. As you cook, Whether you're coming up with your own ideas or finding recipes to try from cookbooks or blogs, play with things like color, vary textures, and look for ways to complement as well as contrast. Ask yourself, what's missing here texturally? Or what flavor component would take this to the next level? Remember that salt, fat, and acid are core to balanced flavor, and that additions like spicy heat, fresh and tangy, crispy crunch, creamy and smooth, or a hit of subtle, unexpected sweetness can really elevate a dish to another level. And tip number 4, try something new, or try an old favorite in a new way. Case in point here, for me at least, is heirloom beans. And I really wish Rancho Gordo had an affiliate program because I mention them regularly here. Once I discovered how delicious a home-cooked bean could be, and once I discovered where I could find varieties of beans beyond the common black turtle, pinto, and garbanzo, my life was transformed. And part of the beauty is that beans are so versatile. They can be cooked up in a plain water and then salted and added to any dish you could imagine. They can also receive a bit more TLC, being cooked up with aromatics like onion and garlic, which allows them to soak up even more delicious flavor and essentially makes them into the base of a soup. And then various ingredients can be added from there. You can keep it simple and just drop in some Tuscan kale and eat it alongside crusty bread. Or you can go all out with a Mexican pozole or a chili, full-blown variations on a classic minestrone, or any number of soups and stews. Beyond my discovered love of home-cooked beans, a particular way I like to flex my foodie muscles in the kitchen is to take beloved recipes from my childhood and figure out plant-based ways to recreate them. This can be as simple as swapping out tofu for the chicken in a main dish, or as involved as tinkering with swaps for eggs, milk, or butter in a favorite cake or bread recipe. Because you like to cook, I hope you find these suggestions helpful and exciting. There's a world of delightful discovery just waiting for you. Finally, I'd like to close with a note on taste buds. Back in episode 4, I talk about taste as habit. In a word, taste is habit. You may find yourself either wondering how you'll get through without missing steak or chicken or cheese, or how you'll develop a liking for a variety of plants you don't even necessarily eat regularly. Let me encourage you. Our taste buds can and do change. Just like moving from sweetened peanut butter to natural peanut butter can take time, or developing a taste for the bitter bite of kale, we can and do get through the initial awkwardness and uncertainty. Our taste buds are marvelously adaptable. Just start eating little bits of what you hope to like and see what happens. Incorporate more and more over time and cut out increasingly greater portions of what you hope to move away from, and you may just be surprised at how far you come. Just remember to also keep your favorite plants front and center. You are a foodie. At the core of your relationship with food is delight, joy. Don't lose that. If anything, you should expect to see it grow as you explore the beautiful world of eating abundant plants. If you have questions or topics you'd like me to address here on Eating for Eden, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to edenandme@substack.com. Also, if you've been enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a review. It's a great help for getting these important words out to others. If you want recipes, check out edenandme.com, where you can find a variety of delicious, healthy recipes to bring what you're learning into the kitchen. Finally, become an email subscriber on Substack to have new podcast episodes delivered directly to your email inbox. If you appreciate the work I'm doing and want to support the show, you'll also have the option of becoming a paid subscriber. That's all for now, friends. Until next time, be well. Thanks for listening to Eating for Eden. If you found this episode informative or inspiring, please consider sharing it with a friend. Climate change is an issue we all need to tackle together, so let's invite others to journey along with us as we continue the conversation and start taking action. Until next week, friends, Take care.